Welcome to New World Now, where host Kim Corbin has compelling conversations with authors published by New World Library. They will discuss their personal journeys and share practical tools we can use to be more aware, mindful, and present in our daily lives. Now, here's your host, Kim Corbin.
It's official. My longtime sweetheart Sven and I are engaged after 15 years of loving each other. It happened a few weeks ago at the Cliffs of Moher in Ireland, where we were on an epic Corbin family adventure in honor of my parents' 50th wedding anniversary. While I knew in advance it was going to happen, the proposal was a surprise for my family. We told them we wanted a group picture taken while we were at the cliffs as a way of gathering everyone together. And then once that happened, Sven got everyone's attention and told a story from early in our relationship about how hearing my laugh bellowing from the lobby while he was getting his wisdom teeth yanked out made everything better at the moment, and how my unique laugh has been a force for him ever since. Then he got down on one knee and said, "Kimberly Lynn Skipper Corbin, will you marry me?" It makes me a little emotional just thinking about it. It was a perfect, beautiful moment that I'll never forget. And of course, I said yes. It's pretty amazing to be embarking on this new adventure in our relationship after 15 years together. And it was our recent engagement that inspired me to invite today's guest, Linda Carroll, to come on the show to talk about her book, Love Cycles, the 5 Essential Stages of Lasting Love. Linda has been a couples therapist for over 30 years, and as you'll soon see, she's an absolute dear who understands at a deep level what it takes to create a relationship that stands the test of time. It's an honor to have her here with me today, so welcome, Linda, and thanks for being here.
Hi, Kim. That's an exciting adventure.
Certainly is.
So after 15 years, you probably know all the stages in and out, and many times over.
Yeah, and we'll definitely talk about some of that today. I thought a good way for us to begin would be by having you explain about the title of your book, Love Cycles, and what it means.
Love cycles refers to the fact that love is a series of stages and cycles. It's not one place that you're in all the time, one set of feelings, one relationship. It's many relationships, like the seasons of the year. And it goes through different cycles that are predictable.
And this is something that you saw through your counseling practice as patterns with your clients, or?
Well, it's something I saw through my whole life. It's something I saw personally for thinking and being disappointed over and over that a relationship was going to be being in love. It's something that I saw in my counseling practice, my coaching practice. People would call or come in and say, "I'm not in love with my partner," or "We don't have sex like we used to, and maybe I should leave." And I began to read and to study and to think about poetry, my other love, and how and biology, another love, and how in all of those there are love poems, that there are aspects of biology that all have to do with changes of seasons. And I thought love is like that too. And the more I read, the more I researched, the more I discovered that, yes, we do know that, but culturally we've got this idea that it's supposed to be just the first stage. So I began to develop what those stages were.
And I would love for you to quickly take us through what the 5 stages of lasting love are. And there's a separate chapter throughout your book for each of them, so there's great information in there. But just kind of to give us a frame of reference to work with, would you take us through the 5 stages?
Sure. The merge, falling in love, chemicals in the brain change. Brain, you can see it in a scan. We get the love cocktail. We have all kinds of chemicals in our body which make us feel like we don't need to eat, to sleep. Butterflies in the stomach, and we see the best of the other person. That lasts about 3 years the first time we fall in love, and we have less and less every time we fall in love. And sometimes it's not that it goes forever, but we don't stay in that state, because eventually what happens is we begin to see the other side. We begin to see that the person we fell in love with because they were so predictable actually is pretty rigid, or the person who was so spontaneous is pretty impulsive. And we begin to realize that all the things we love to do together, that we love to share, actually some of those were because we were under the spell. And we really don't love camping or opera or bird watching or whatever it is all that much. And as we start to realize that, Kim, what happens is there's a vulnerability we feel when we fall in love. We've opened our heart thinking this is it. I'm not alone anymore. And when we start to realize that that it isn't perfect, that vulnerability creates in us a certain reactivity. We move into the power struggle. We move into a certain sense of disappointment or worry. Is this the right relationship? And that I call doubt and denial. And we move into loops, or the beginning of power struggles that often go through the whole relationship. People stay in that for quite a while, sometimes years and years. But eventually, for most of us, we become kind of hardened in our loops, in our protections with each other, and we disconnect. We feel like we're on parallel lives. Some just like in the beginning, we say we have everything in common. In stage 3, which I call disillusionment, we begin to feel we have nothing in common. This is kind of the opposite. Everything's perfect. Everything's wrong. And again, it's a disenchantment and it's a trance. When people come to see me or they call for an intensive session and they are feeling in that, I say to them, before you make a decision, why don't you check out what's really going on and learn some skills and see if you can get it back. Sometimes people can get it back better than they ever had it. Sometimes not. But that's not the right time to leave, in my opinion. When you're starting to doubt, this isn't the perfect relationship, that's when you get to really learn how to love. The 4th stage is decision. Do we separate? Do we live together in parallel lives? Do we move apart? Do we get into some kind of a counseling or coaching or read books together or figure out how we can bring some of it back if that's possible, which it often is. So in that 4th stage of love, we're making a decision that's when we want to sometimes speed things up. And I'm telling people all the time, slow it down, slow it down. The 5th stage of love, and I think that we can get there whether we stay with the partner or not, is wholehearted love. And wholehearted love, it's not really a version of the merge. It's based on really knowing how to love yourself, knowing you're whole. It has to come from wholeness, not halfness. So wholehearted love means you have to work with what gets in the way, where you're half-hearted or closed-hearted or hard-hearted. And learning how to love another person, I think, takes a lifetime. It's a huge practice because I think people are annoying. For many of us, certainly for me, not perfect. There's disappointment, disenchantment. But I see my relationship as a spiritual path, really, of learning to love an imperfect person, me, an imperfect person, loving another imperfect person who pleases me more than he doesn't. But that doesn't mean that there aren't things that make me feel crazy, or for him, for me. So wholehearted love is that practice of learning to be whole in our loving, not just with our partner, with our ex-partner. Boy, there's a big spiritual practice, or with the whole world in general. And in that space, some of those early feelings come back. Sometimes they come back and they stay. Sometimes they come back for 2 minutes. But we go round the cycle, round and round, but we're not stuck in it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I definitely can relate. And Sven and I's relationship in our 15 years together has certainly gone through all of those phases and at different times to get to this point now where I have enough faith in the wholeheartedness of our love that I was really willing to relinquish my freedom and move in with him. And now we're engaged and it's all moving really quickly. But it's interesting because I feel like it's brought us back to being engaged feels like a renewed merge cycle. Yeah. So it's something that we cycle through in the same relationship, right?
That's right. We can come back to it just like we cycle into you can have this interview with me and go home and see that he's left his clothes all over the floor and move immediately into stage 3. What am I doing? This is such a mistake. But if you know what it is, it's natural. You can either laugh at yourself or negotiate something about how he picks his socks up, but you don't have to stay there. But we don't stay in one place in anything, including in our relationships.
Yeah. Well, I have to tell you the story because as I was immersed in your work this weekend, I was going deep. I'm reading everything. I'm like, this is so great. And Sven and I went out with some of his friends and we had some drinks. And then he decided he wanted to go out after and I was going to come back and read more of the book and focus, which is, that was great. And I was like, oh, this is it's such a good place in our relationship. And I felt so good about it. And then I sent him a text message later in the evening that he didn't respond to. And he's just not a technological kind of guy. Like, I know this about him. And I got totally triggered that I wasn't hearing back from him. I mean, like, completely, majorly triggered. And I thought, what a wonderful opportunity for me to put some of these ideas in Love Cycles to the test. So one of the things I realized is that I was having what you call in the book an 80-20 reaction to what was going on.
Yes.
So will you explain what that is?
Well, if you're in a situation, if you look at the scale from 0 to 100, and 100 is when you're reacting really appropriately to something huge, you have a 80% reaction to a 20% issue. The distance between 80 and 20 is your history, that there's something vulnerable getting triggered in there. So if you're going to say, let's go for a walk on Saturday, and your partner says, sure, and then says, oh, I forgot the next day, I'm going off to play golf with my friends, and you begin to cry and sob and say, he never loved me to begin with, that's pretty much an 80-20. You know, where in your history is abandonment an issue? So 80-20 is something we all have, our own vulnerabilities that we get triggered into.
Yes. And my abandonment issues were like, I mean, all these scenarios are running through my mind. Every half an hour, I'm texting him. I just turned into like a crazy person. And so another one of the tools in your book that I employed then that you write about, which I'd never really had thought about from a relationship standpoint, was self-soothing. So will you tell us about self-soothing?
Yes, I will, because when we know about emotional intelligence, that managing our reactivity is one of the most important qualities of emotionally intelligent people. It's not that they don't get reactive, but they know how to soothe themselves back down rather than to put it out on someone else. So the first thing is you have to know that you're overreacting. Because if you're caught in the righteousness of, I've texted him, I finally said yes, now we're getting married, and look what he's done. And that can go down a whole bad road, right? You have to be able to have the witnessing to say, wow, I'm in a reaction. This is about me, not him. So there's a lot of self-knowledge that went into that. But still your body is churning, and you're in that fight or flight place in your body. And at that point, if you have the awareness that this isn't really about him, you can start to work on slowing your breathing down, going for a walk, looking at your thoughts, saying these thoughts are all so paranoid and fearful. These are fear thoughts. That's not really what's going on. Is this something, does he always abandon me and ignore me? Is this something that happens every day? I suppose if you're in a dark enough place, you can find proof every day. But if you're in a pretty conscious place like you were, you start to talk yourself into seeing the bigger picture out of that little pinpoint of, quote, the truth, into seeing the whole thing and saying, boy, that was a reaction from me. And I like to respond to my text. That would be nice. That's a 15. But the reaction is an 85.
Yeah, and it's so much easier said than done. I mean, I have my hand on my heart. I was like saying my equanimity mantra that I use about no matter how I wish things might be, things are as they are. And I really worked on it, but it's not as easy as it sounds on paper.
No, it's not. It's a lifetime practice because, over a lifetime, the issues change. Whatever the stresses are, they change. We're not prepared for the next one. We get one figured out, and then the next one comes. And so we keep getting knocked off balance. If we don't have that inner place to go to, then we're really in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. And then another thing from the book that came to mind in this, my dark night that I was going through was the realization that I'm not Sven and Sven's not me. And after 15 years, I know that Sven is not a technological guy. He's the kind of person who gets completely in the moment and immersed where he is. And I'm a social media manager by trade. So I'm on the phone, I'm checking it every time. It's not personal. And he's working on it. He really is, but he just does not get it. And so I realized he's not me. And
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that's it. You write about that quite a bit, that question of why aren't you me? And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit about why it's so important for couples to come to realize and to come to terms with that.
Well, at the beginning, you don't fall in love with your clone. You fall in love with someone who's different. And the fact that he is not this technical person and that he gets all lost in the moment probably was a huge attraction. That was stage one. But stage two happens when he doesn't respond. Suddenly he doesn't respond to your text when you want him to. And then that very quality becomes a proof of something else that's negative. He doesn't care about me. And that bringing yourself back to, wait a minute, he probably doesn't even look at his iPhone. It's not that he looks at it and says, oh, it's Kim again. Who wants to talk to her? It's that he wasn't thinking of it. He was looking at the water and the reflections in the water and the bird. And he hadn't
totally.
So, right. Okay. So that's what I love the Enneagram, but I think anything can help us. The Enneagram is a personality program or test, a way of looking at different types of people. But I think anything that helps us see where our partner is different than us, not better, not worse, but different, gives us that objectivity to remember, wait a minute, this is different for him than it is for me. It's okay if you don't like the movie I like. It doesn't mean we don't belong together. It's okay if you don't like my best friend or you don't want to go to Cuba. Those things are okay, but they actually feel like sort of an affront when they first happen. When we've gone from that place of you're half of me and I'm half of you to, wait a minute, we don't have this stuff in common at all. In fact, you don't even get what I'm talking about when I'm talking about this. So I think that the great gift and the great gift of a relationship is what I call differentiation. And it's learning how to hold both truths at once, being a part of of a relationship with another person, and also standing in your own self and being able to do both of those. So when I'm with you, I don't lose me. And when I'm with myself, I don't lose us. And that comes from, again, finding that our wholeness comes from within. We used to have this expression in high school. I don't know if you did, but I looking for the one. Do you remember the one with capital T and capital O? Is that the one? Is that the one? And the one, the big joke is the one is me. I'm the one. I got to be the one. And so that says everything to me about finding the one that's going to make me whole. And I've got to make myself whole. So all of these stories that you're telling are great ways for you to do your own practice.
Yes, and absolutely, that's exactly what this felt like. Like I had the awareness because I was so fresh in your material that it really helped me navigate it different. Yeah. And it also helped me by the time he got home, I had self-soothed enough that I wasn't completely crazy and angry. And I was able to say, this is why I'm having an anxiety attack. I'm working through this. I'm trying to own it. And it just, it would make such a difference for me and make me feel safer if we could just make a system where we check in at least once a night or something like that. And which he is, your book really helped me recognize how like you write about defensiveness, and I'm defensive. I mean, the littlest thing I can be like someone says, do you want to open the window? And I say, I didn't leave the window open last night. Like I have a short fuse. Like I really can be like that. Sven, on the other hand, I can be so triggered and angry, and he has this wonderful way of not reacting. He doesn't escalate it. He just holds whatever I bring to him in such a way that it allows me often to have my own behavior reflected back at me because I'm working on myself.
Yes.
It's like a keto almost where they say don't react. Like if you just move with what the opposition is doing, it puts it back on them.
That's right.
And he really does that for me.
Boy, that's an amazing thing that he doesn't get triggered by your defensiveness. And that's
no, he doesn't.
Something in him. So yeah. Well, that sounds fabulous. And so, but maybe sometimes another part of that may be that you were going to want to have him react and he won't. And then you're going to be feeling bad, like, well, why isn't he there? Why isn't he reacting to my defensiveness?
Well, he's not perfect. He reacts sometimes, but generally speaking, he definitely reacts. But for the most part, he's a soft landing place for my triggers, which is helpful.
That's great.
Yeah. And it's funny because you write, and I want to talk about this next, about the goodwill account of relationships. And at first I was thinking, I was kind of giving myself a hard time, like he's so good. And then I thought, wait, I make goodwill accounts to our relationships in different ways. Like that's a huge way that he does it. by not being reactive to my triggers. And I do it by making coffee and doing laundry and bringing gifts. And so will you tell us about the goodwill account of a relationship and how?
I will, because I think it's so important, in the easy days when everything is love, 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 and it feels good. That's the quote, feels good. It's easy to extend ourselves for the sake of the other person, to do things that we know will please them or make their life easier. But as we start to feel less glowy about that, I made that word up, glowy, but as we start to feel less glowy, it's harder for some of us to extend, to give to the other person. I often say that that lattes save my marriage. My husband makes me a latte every day, and he makes them sometimes, and he brings it to me every morning. Sometimes he does it with a smile and a hug, and sometimes he just puts it down because he's busy. Sometimes he's actually put it on his side of the bed to punish me because he's mad at something, and it's like you have to stretch for that latte. But he brings it every morning, and he's done that. He's done that for decades, and there's something about that starts everything new. Even when we're not in a good space with each other, that latte comes in and some part of my heart softens. And then I think that there are things ways we extend that say to the other person, I care about you. I can hold a space where I'm disappointed or even angry or feel betrayed or whatever is up, but I still am going to take your car in to get it fixed because I know that's important to you, and we don't have to be close today, but I still will bring you the latte or I'll make your dinner because it's a part of putting into the account. And often what I see is people who they put into the account when it feels good. It's kind of like doing your practice when you want to. If you have a spiritual practice, or you're a writer, or you go to work when you want. I mean, if we went to work when we want to, none of us would have jobs. But we really do hold different standards, many of us, for ourselves about going to work or about being nice to the neighbors than to our partner. And we give ourselves often a lot more permission to be nasty to our partner when we're nice to the dry cleaner. So I think that the goodwill account is really making sure that we have that we put in what we can, whether it's good or it's not good, whether we feel good or not good, because that's part about being, I think, a partner in integrity, a partner who's living in some integrity. And of course, there's certain things we're not going to put in when we don't feel good. We're feeling upset. But there's always things that we can do to make the other person know that they're cared about, even if they're not particularly liked that day.
Yeah. And I really like the idea, too, that goodwill that is contributed, in the more effortless cycles of the love relationship then carries over. Like it's still there to draw from if you have been depositing enough when you get into the more challenging times.
That's right. And it does. I think it does work like that. I just see people who are so dried up and they can't even look at each other or smile or say, I'm glad your day was good. And so I really just get them sort of warming up with trying to be kind. You don't have to like each other. Just try to be civil and kind. And that can start to build the account.
Yes. Yes. Okay, I want to talk quickly, too. We're starting to run out of time, but about sex, because you have a great chapter in there about sex. And, after 15 years with someone, it definitely changes. And I loved this passage so much. When it comes to sex, some of us are like light switches, always ready to be turned on. Others are like slow heating irons or irons that don't heat up at all. So what advice or perspective do you have for couples who have different libido levels?
Well, first of all, is to be able to talk about it and laugh about it and know it's normal. And second of all, is to know that, we are focused, again, like we are on stage one in our culture, we are so focused on desire. Some people have very high desire, and some people have very, very low. And there's another stage after desire called arousal. And we can get aroused. For people who will know what I'm talking about, when you don't even think about sex, but your partner wants to, you say, okay, and then you think, why don't we do this more often? It feels so great. That's because you've become aroused. We don't need desire to get to arousal. The first thing we need, if we want to go back to goodwill, is we need goodwill to be able to talk about it and not personalize our partner's libido. High libido notices everything sexual. They go to the laundromat, they get turned on. They notice every person that walks down the street as a possible partner. It doesn't mean they act on it, but the higher the libido, the more people are tortured by sexual fantasies about other people, etc. Now, what we do with it is a whole different thing, but the feeling is not in any way betrayal. Low libido doesn't get turned on with hardly anything. And so it's easy for the person who's with high libido to say, oh, they're always turned on by other people. And if they loved me, they'd never notice anyone else. High libido says, well, I never turn her on. She doesn't really care about me. But neither of that is true. That's a biological function. There's a lot we can do with being very different in our drives and having a good sex life. We can spice it up in endless ways. I was just with a couple yesterday who were having this trouble, and I had them agree that over the next month, one day, just one day, one of the people would spend an hour and a half doing whatever their partner wanted just to please them. And 2 weeks later, they'd switch. And for one person, that would be a massage, just to be sensual and erotic and to light some candles and to just feel the pleasure of skin to skin. Don't have sex. If that's your night, don't have sex. Then the other person trades. But we have to be able to play with it. And because we go into shutdown about these differences and start to personalize them, the goodwill goes out, and then we don't talk about it. We make a story up in our head.
Yes, just so easy to do. Okay, so we have about a minute and a half left. And so I would love to just ask you for your best advice for Sven and I as we embark on this exciting new relationship adventure called marriage.
Yes. Okay. I think we've talked about so much that's really important. Like, is there one thing that it's a daily practice? It has to be remade. I think it was a great quote by Ursula Le Guin, that it's like bread. We have to remake it all the time. And that all kinds of things can knock it off. When we think we've got it together, something comes in and we don't know how to manage it. And so we wake up every morning with some new intention of creating it again, of starting the morning with something that's positive, even if we have all kinds of other stuff going on. It's a great adventure, and it takes a lifetime. And I think it's when I see people getting older who have really put into that bank account of love, I see them managing a lot of difficult things that happen as people get older with a lot of grace and a lot of caring. And the people who haven't really get into trouble as they go down later paths in life. So I think it's the greatest adventure I know, learning to love and learning to really work out with another person.
Yes.
It's a great grist.
Indeed. Oh, well, I love you so much, Linda, and I really appreciate you.
Their book just so I can be with you again. I know. It hasn't happened yet.
All in good time.
I loved our together, and I love it now. For
more information on Linda Carroll and Love Cycles, visit her online at lovecycles.org. And as always, if you enjoyed today's podcast and would take a moment to leave a 5-star rating and or review in iTunes, that would be greatly appreciated. I'd also like to invite you to join the New World Now podcast community on Facebook, where you can be a part of discussions about current episodes and see Sven and I's engagement picture from Ireland, which I'll be posting there. Simply search for New World Now podcast on Facebook to join the group. I hope to see you there and look forward to connecting on future episodes of New World Now.
Thank you for listening to New World Now with Kim Corbin from New World Library. New World Library publishes books and audios that inspire and challenge us to improve the quality of our lives and our world. For more information about their books and authors, you can visit them online at newworldlibrary.com.